TCU is 2-1 following the Houston disaster after that bye week, but following a tough loss to Baylor. Has your optimism about Sonny Dykes and his coaching staff changed at all? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. We are available here on YouTube. You can subscribe to that channel. Also, wherever it is you get your podcasts. We're brought to you today by FanDuel. Appreciate FanDuel being a longtime sponsor of the Locked On Network. You win your first $5 bet, and you get $150 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com or on the FanDuel app. We're going to talk some hoops today. In segment 3, TCU men's basketball. They kick off their season against Florida A&M tonight. We'll discuss about issues along the defensive line. Had some injuries there on Saturday that really affected the outcome of that game against Baylor. And I think the status, especially Marcus Deal, is going to tell us a lot about the next few ball games, just where he is health-wise and how available he'll be. Coming up Saturday, they play Oklahoma State at 6 p.m. That'll be on Fox Sports 1. But we'll start today with a question that I threw out on social media on Sunday. Frogs are 2-1 since that debacle against Houston. They had the bye week. They beat Utah. They beat Texas Tech in a thrilling come-from-behind victory. And they fall to Baylor in another one-score ball game. 37-34 was the final. Walk-off field goal, right? You watched it. You saw it. The postgame shows up if you want to check that out. My immediate reaction to that game, I was actually kind of encouraged. I feel like the effort and energy and intensity has continued to ramp up, and they're playing at a much cleaner level than they have been in the past. They didn't turn the ball over on Saturday. They didn't have a ton of just brain-dead penalties. That being said, they played a pretty clean football game and had some great moments on offense and defense. Defensively really struggled in the second half. They still lose to a Baylor team that is playing better over the last few weeks, but it's a winnable football game. And I think the most frustrating aspect of this season has been, aside from the SMU game where they just got destroyed from the jump. I mean, UCF, you have the huge lead that you blew. Houston, maybe you don't even count that as on paper, it should have been a very winnable game, but they sort of dominated from start to finish in a lot of ways and dictated the pace of that game. And there wasn't really a time, maybe midway through the third quarter, when they had cut the lead to 12 and got the ball back. But other than that, it felt like Houston was going to just kind of run away with that victory. And in the end, they did win by a couple touchdowns. And then finally, the Baylor game, really a coin flip ball game. But the big thing that stood out to me was you got whipped in the trenches. O-line did good in pass protection like they have for the most part all year. But once again, they cannot run the ball unless it's using Savion Williams and kind of this gimmicky Wildcat package, which I commend Kendall Briles for figuring out a way to do it. But it's still concerning that in week 9, you can't find a way to run the football effectively, just the traditional old school way, handing it off to your running backs. And defensively, they've done some nice things at times, but the Baylor game was sort of back to what we saw earlier this year, which is it can be really tough for this defense to get a stop. And if teams are coming downhill and running the ball at them, they don't always have a great answer. I felt like they had found some answers on the defensive line. Unfortunately, those guys got hurt. Marcus Deal apparently got hurt in practice. Hakeem Ajibaliba went down in the first possession of the game. And Timon Mitchell and Caleb Fox had to play a lot of snaps. And that was a rough deal for the TCU defense. I'm also confused as to why they don't commit more to the run game. I understand. I think it's a tougher time than ever to be a defensive coordinator because there's so many offenses that do the check with me stuff and post-snap reads. So you line up in a certain way, and the offense kind of dictates what they do off of that. But at the same time, Sawyer Robertson's having a good year, and he made some good plays, especially with his legs. I thought he was effective extending plays and getting stuff in the designed run game. At the same time, running the ball was what they were best at, and that's what they were hanging their hat on. It's what was creating second and third and manageable. They had some big pop plays for touchdowns off that. I just feel like at a certain point you have to say, okay, beat us a different way, but we're going to put 7 or 8 guys in the box and come downhill and try to stop it. Tackling was also a big issue, just a lot of yards after contact. There were plays where there were some good run fits and guys were there, but they just can't make the play. So I threw this out there. I said, are you more optimistic about Sonny Dykes and company after the last few weeks? And I asked people to tell me why. 71% of you said no. 28% of you said yes. Everybody that responded with reasons told me no. And I've kind of gone around in circles thinking about this weekend. First off, I guess I'll tell you what I think is going to happen in 2025. I feel like Sonny Dykes will be the coach again next year. I think he's bought himself another season. Now, crazy things can happen in the last few weeks of the year. Somebody asked me in the post-game show afterwards, they said, do you think we'd make a bowl game? And my response basically was, well, we better. Because if they can't split these two games between Oklahoma State and Arizona, there's a bye week in between the Oklahoma State game and the Arizona game. I realize Oklahoma State has Ollie Gordon, and running the ball is something they do pretty effectively, but I'll have to dig into the numbers more this week. I mean, they haven't won a Big 12 game. This should be a game at home that you win. If you drop that one, I would at least expect them coming off a bye week to handle Arizona pretty well, which is another team that seems like they're kind of on quit watch as first-year coach Brett Brennan is really struggling coming over from San Jose State. So you should be able to get one more victory. At Cincinnati, I believe, will be a tough game. I feel like ultimately they'll probably finish the year 7-5. If I had to bet, I would say they'll win the next two games at home. And then if I had to pick today, I don't think they beat Cincinnati on the road, but we'll see what happens when they go there. And 7-5, I said before the season they would go 8-4. 7-5 is not too far off of that. Now the schedule after the year started looks more manageable than it did before the season. I mean, in all honesty, you avoided Iowa State, you avoided Colorado, you avoided BYU. Utah on the road was not nearly as daunting as it seemed at the beginning of the year. You won that game. And the games you dropped, aside from the Houston game, which you should have won on paper, it feels like everything was winnable. So my biggest problem with Sonny at the moment is, I think part of it's personnel. For all the talk about how talented this TCU team is comparatively to the Big 12, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. And I understand talent acquisition is part of the job of the head coach. This also falls on Coach Dykes. But I think the receiver room, I feel like they've got the best receiver room in the Big 12. I would put that up against anybody. Maybe Colorado has more talent there. Savion Williams, I mean, he has the occasional bad drop, but he's a talented player. Jack Besh has turned into a monster on the outside. J.P. Richardson's a really good slot receiver. Eric McAllister is a great guy to have as a reserve. Your running backs, I'm at the point now, I said this Saturday, like you have to have either Jeremy Payne or Trent Battle on the field. I think that was a total miss by them evaluation-wise. And I said before the year, I was like, I think they're going to be fine at the running back position. I was wrong. I was very wrong. And Sonny Dykes said, and I get it, you're not going to just bash a position group on a radio show, but he said on 365 Sports, they asked him about the running back room, and he's like, well, we had some concerns about it before spring practice, but we saw the guys get out there and play, and we think they're going to be better. And he mentioned Cam Cook and Trey Sanders, and Trey hasn't even really played this year. He honestly didn't talk about the young guys who ended up being or the young guys, by young guys, I mean Jeremy Payne, I guess, who's been great. I mean, he's shown some great contact balance. I'd love to see him get some more opportunities. Trent Battle had a rough game Saturday. I think he brings some things to the table, but I don't feel like he's a week in and week out type of workhorse running back, and they just didn't have that guy in the room. O-line, I've talked about my concerns there. Now, I will say if Cade Bennett's healthy, I think this is a better unit. His injury has hurt a lot. That being said, I mean, my biggest gripe with the offensive line group is I just don't really feel like they've gotten better. I think they're good in pass protection. I think they struggle to run the ball, and that's been the same song and dance all year long. So I feel like part of that falls on A.J. Ricker. I don't totally understand what they're doing run scheme-wise. I don't really feel like they try to move people. I think they try to just do some influence blocking, and I have qualms about that too, but I'm not an X's and O's expert, so I guess I'll have to defer to the coaching staff on that to a certain extent. Defensive line-wise, I think part of it's injury. If everybody's healthy, then I would say it's one of the more talented groups on the team. But right now, with the players that are unavailable, it's a struggle. Corner, I mean, and you've had injuries there too, but corner and linebacker, I mean, there's a lot of guys running out there week to week that are struggling to make plays. So the thing with Sonny is when he got here from SMU, the idea of what can he do, what can he excel at, it was honestly like, okay, well, he can go get talent. That's his best quality. He was early to the portal game, kind of understanding it, using it to his advantage. And so he can put together a very talented roster. He's kind of a hands-off coach. He allows his talented guys to go play. And then you get great results. And in year one, that was the case. Of course, that wasn't really his team that he built, but he still gets a lot of credit for 2022 because of the way that he unlocked the talent and the mentality of that group. The last 2 seasons have been pretty rough. But if you end up 7-5 or 8-4, I just feel like you have to say, let's give this guy another opportunity to get after it and go. And the team obviously still believes in him. Now we can debate the game management stuff. I thought punting on 4th and 2, in hindsight was a big mistake. Just the way that game script was playing out, right? Because you couldn't get a stop and you just needed to go score and keep the lead. So at the very least, as Baylor continued to play well on offense, they were only tying the game instead of, taking a lead there. It's just hard in my mind to figure out right now, like what advantage does Sonny give you on a week-to-week basis? I don't think he is, and I'm not saying this is the end-all be-all, but I don't feel like he's a coach that's giving you a schematic advantage each and every week, where he's cooking up something on offense or defense that is unexpected and that is giving team fits. He didn't really do that. I mean, he's an offensive guy, but he's handed that over to his OC. I feel like Kendall Browse has done a good job this year, but Sonny's a part of that, but it's not his baby, right? Defensively, he's very hands-off. And I like some of the things that Andy Avalos has brought to the table, and I feel like you're not going to give up on him after 1 year, but the defense has been improved at times, and then at times it's been very similar to what they were last year. So if you're not giving your team a great schematic advantage, if you're not excelling at game management, like making decisions within the game, controlling the clock, when do we go for it? When do we punt? When do we kick field goals? Those types of things. Then the only area really left is talent acquisition and evaluation. And I think that's another area where they've struggled. Now, maybe it's as simple as the young guys on this roster are the key to really unlock this, and they have to get to a place where they can be contributors. But that would mean next year is going to be a very pivotal year to see that. Like, you need to see some of these young offensive linemen that you recruited, Tobias Steps, Mitch Hodnett, Cooper Powers, Samir Camacho. And I don't think all those guys are going to be starters, obviously, because you'll get Cade Bennett back. You should have Colton Deary back. We'll see what they do with the tackle position. Ben Taylor Whitfield's played a lot with mixed results. But you should start to see those players break into a place in the depth chart where at least we're talking about them during spring camp and during the fall of like, hey, they're pushing for a job. I do think they've done a good job evaluating, or I think they've done a good job developing quarterbacks. They sent Max to another stratosphere. Chandler, that was a mess. But this year with Josh Hoover, I feel like Josh has improved a lot. And he should be set up to go into next year with a lot of juice and some opportunities. But I'd love to know from you in the comment section, where are you at after this latest loss? And I think they played better over the last 3 weeks. Does it give you optimism for the long-term future? Or are you sort of like, well, it's still wait and see for me, or are you already checked out? I mean, that's fine too. I'm not here to tell people what to think. This is a marketplace of ideas. When we come back, we'll discuss the D-line health issues and more. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team. We do it here every day. Thank you to our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Anybody else get whipped by daylight saving times? My youngest son, he's 2. He woke up at 5:15 on Sunday morning because he usually wakes up about 6 o'clock or 6:30, and Well, in his mind, that was what time it was. His body clock was unadjusted yet. So we were up very early before we went to church, and that was kind of a long 3 hours before we got out the door and went to church on Sunday morning. I could have used a 5-hour energy. Fuel your fandom. They have a limited edition Stand the Fan 5-hour energy 12-pack. You can build your own. It's available online. 5-hour energy, not just in a convenience store anymore. What's your fan fuel this week? What hyped you up from that TCU Baylor game? I know it was a tough loss, but man, I was thrilled to see Jordan Bailey get out there and make some things happen. Had 2 catches, had one incredible one-handed catch in the end zone. Also caught a pass on I think 2nd and 10 in the fourth quarter and moved the chains. So nicely done by him. Fuel your fandom at 5hourenergy.com. You can build your own 12-pack. 5-hour energy. It's the same great formula that you've seen in convenience stores for years, but now it's more convenient and available online. 5hourenergy.com. Do it today. So Marcus Deal was apparently banged up in practice, according to Sonny Dykes in the post-game presser. Sonny will speak on Tuesday in his weekly scheduled Tuesday update. He got hurt in practice this past week, so he was unavailable for the Baylor game, and we should hopefully get a better idea of what his status will be for Oklahoma State tomorrow. Hakeem Ajibalaiba also went down with an injury in the first series of that game, so maybe we'll have a better idea of where he is at health-wise. Losing those 2 guys was tough, man. Baylor really dominated on the O-line with the absence of those players, and they just don't have a ton of depth. They've already dealt with some injuries at DT right now. I mean, Mitchell, Fox, Sterling Brooks is a true freshman. I'm not sure he's ready to get thrown in there. They've been rolling Connor Lindgren out there at times, and he's had some good moments, but I don't think he's ready to play a lion's share of the snaps yet. So Oklahoma State has struggled up front too. They struggled just in general. They're winless in Big 12 play. They do have Ollie Gordon, though, and he had a great game against BYU a few weeks ago. So that's my major concern for this week. If you're struggling on the defensive line and you just personnel-wise can't really match up, is Oklahoma State with a quarterback in Alan Bowman who has had a lot of issues this year, are they just going to lean on that run game until you find a way to stop it? I do think once you get to 6 wins, really regardless of what the health status of those guys are, and this doesn't just go for the defensive line, this is really every position. Once you get to 6 wins, I'd love to see some more of this young talent get some opportunities on the field. And it's a tough decision because you don't want to leave – you want to leave your experienced players out there as long as possible if they're being productive. But, I mean, I'd like to see Jonathan Bax get some opportunities, a guy that they really lobbied to get back after he went in the portal in the offseason. Nate Palmer at running back, if he's got a chance to get some carries, I think that would be good. Maybe you throw Braylon James out there wide receiver. I know you're stacked at that spot, but I feel like these last 3 games, if you can get the postseason locked up, then the last 2 games, a good opportunity to say, all right, what do we have here? Who are some guys that we can give chances, snaps, opportunities to in live action that we can't simulate in practice, and just see how they react, see how they hold up? That would be a big benefit of winning this week, along with just getting a victory and getting to 6-4. Cooper McDonald, also a player that's been injured and has been out. Devin Deal's done a really nice job in his absence. If he's ready to go, then I also wonder how they kind of allocate snaps. And maybe they try to put both of them on the same field at the same time. I don't know. They talked about in fall camp, they had some packages where they messed with that and kind of did that. I haven't seen that really come to fruition this year yet. And maybe it's as simple as just in kind of 3rd and long, obvious situations where they can go rush the passer, but they're not getting a ton of production, from their interior D-line and their defensive ends. It's really been all those edge guys and the occasional blitz too. And on that 4th and 9 play, man, Caleb Alarmzor, he had a chance, just couldn't quite get there. He did a nice job getting around the guard on that play, but just couldn't quite get to Sawyer Robertson in time to mess up the timing of that route, and he ends up hitting Trigg on that crossing pattern, and that was the ball game. They got a first down there. They get 13 yards on the next play in a run, and then suddenly they're just set up to go kick a field goal and win the ball game. So tough loss for TCU. We'll see how they bounce back this week. TCU basketball starts tonight. We'll discuss that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. Before we do that, though, I do want to mention our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel has been very loyal to us for a long time. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Get up to $150 in bonus bets with one winning $5 bet. College basketball is now available to bet on FanDuel. Also, college football, obviously, the NFL, NHL, NBA. It's a great time to be a sports fan, and FanDuel makes it even more exciting with all their great deals. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app, if you ever wondered about how to dip your toe in the water into that world, FanDuel is a great place to start. They're official betting partner of the NFL and a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So, yeah, Jamie Dixon's squad, they will tip off the regular season tonight against Florida A&M at home. It's a 7 p.m. tip. The game's on ESPN+. They played Arkansas in a scrimmage at Dickies Arena. If anybody was there in person, give me your impressions of the ball game. They came back and won 66-65. Ernest Uday led the scoring with 13 points. Frankie Collins had 10 points and 6 assists. Vashawn Alette had 10 points as well. He's going to be a big-time scorer off the bench. One of their freshmen they were super excited about, Micah Robinson, he had 8 points in 11 minutes. Jace Posey with 4, David Punch with 5. Noah Reynolds had 5. So another year where you're rolling with an entirely different squad. Brendan Wenzel hit a 3 in the clutch to win that ball game, and they got a stop at the buzzer to defeat Arkansas. John Calipari coaching the Hogs now. So that's a talented group. You're breaking in a whole new starting five. Frankie Collins is most likely going to be your point guard all year long, and I think he is an upgrade from what they had last year with Avery Anderson, Jameer Nelson Jr., at least from just a distributing the ball standpoint. So hopefully your offense runs smoother just from that aspect. Jamie Dixon also said he thinks they have better shooters. That didn't really show up too much in the scrimmage. They were 8 of 25 from 3 and 8 of 14 from the free throw line, but they do feel like they can spread the floor better this year with Noah Reynolds from Green Bay, who's kind of a sharpshooter, Rashawn Alette from Old Dominion, who filled it up last year as a freshman for the Monarchs when he was out there playing. Wenzel is kind of a do-everything forward type. Seems like in that scrimmage he was doing a lot of the dirty work, that stuff that didn't show up in the box score, but also can step out and hit a 3. Ernest Uday is going to be a huge key to this group. Can he stay out of foul trouble because they don't have a ton of depth in the front court? And can he be a productive scorer? Because we saw he was a lob threat last year, but that was really it. Aside from being able to go get the ball and slam it down, that was what he did. And can he add that other dimension to his game, scoring in the post and not just being a rim runner? Trezarian White will be your 4. He's kind of taking over the Emmanuel Miller role. He had 5 points in that Arkansas scrimmage. He's somebody that can score at all 3 levels of the court. So I think there's some talent here. Now, as always, we're talking about Big 12 basketball, which is the best conference in the country. It's really difficult to go day in and day out and win. And there's some teams like Baylor, like Houston, like Arizona that are more talented on paper, but TCU should once again be in a place where they're able to be competitive most nights, especially if this transfer unit can come together quickly and mesh and have some continuity as the year goes on. Somebody asked me, a Frog fan, I believe on YouTube, asked me if I was doing a live reaction show after the game tonight. Not tonight. I'll have reaction after the game, but it won't be the live post-game show because I'm recording something else at 9 tonight, and that'll be just as the game is wrapping up. So won't have a live post-game show, but let me know. This is kind of a tough time of year because hoops is going on, and I want to talk about it. I want to cover it in depth, but football is obviously king. And so typically the way I go about it is I talk about hoops in the third segment, and we'll just react to the game the night before or whatever. But let me know if you prefer it to be its own standalone episode, because I can do it that way. I mean, I can just put together. It would be shorter. It wouldn't be 28 minutes, probably like 10 to 12. But you can hit me up in the YouTube comments or at SimcockSteven on Twitter. If you want more hoops talk, then I can kind of do in-depth stuff in its own separate entity. Still on the YouTube channel and everything, obviously, but just in its own separate podcast. And then during football season, we'll mainly talk about football on this show. Or I can just wrap it up in the third segment like I have in the past, and we can go about it that way. I'll kind of leave it up to the audience and what you guys react to. But I'm excited to see this team play. The transfer portal is frustrating in some ways. It's really exciting for me, though, in that you get a new roster to just evaluate each and every year. And, I mean, it's fun to see, like, oh, we got this player, we got that player. What did they do at their last stop? So first real action that we'll get against Florida A&M tonight. The TCU women, they'll kick off their season tomorrow as well. Really exciting time for Mark Campbell's squad as he added Haley Van Lith, Donovan Hunter, Maddie Shear, and a number of other really good players in the transfer portal. They will play Houston Christian tomorrow night at 6:30. That'll also be on ESPN Plus, but we'll get our first look at that team in live and real action. And it should be fun to check them out and see what they can do this upcoming season. Some of you had some reactions to Saturday's post-game show. I'll just cover one right here because we're running out of time. Brian Caper says, Holly and I have begrudgingly come to the conclusion that Coach Dykes is not the answer. I want it to be. It seems like a very good man, but we look out of sorts and it's not going to get better. He says, let's move on now and take our lumps. Yeah, I think Sonny's a good dude too. I mean, just to get that out of the way, I think he's a good person. I think he's trying his best and all those things. If you make a move now, my big concern would be, and I understand a lot of people are like, well, it can't be much worse. I mean, they're 5-4. I get everybody thinks the schedule is super manageable and all that, but I still feel like there's a good chance they finish with 7 or 8 wins. If you move on after this year, I would understand it depending on what happens the rest of the season. But that means you're kind of going into rebuild mode. I mean, you're probably losing the majority of this roster. You're having to go get somebody. And, yeah, you can rebuild quickly in the transfer portal. But the main issue that we've been talking about is O-line and D-line play. I don't think that's something that you can just rework overnight. So I believe he'll be here next year. I think that's the right decision. Now, that can be subject to change given what happens over the last 3 weeks, but I think that's where they're at. And next year will be a huge season to prove it or not. And we'll go from there. But as disappointing as that loss was, I came away mainly encouraged with the continued upward trajectory of this team. We'll see how they handle the next 3 weeks, though. And as always, I'm reacting to what's happening in front of me. So we'll see if that changes when they take on Oklahoma State Saturday night. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. We are always free and available wherever it is you get your podcast.